The final common reduction we're going to talk about, I think, kind of encapsulates everything else we've sort of chatted about today, because admin, overheads, they kind of worm their way into so much of what we do or what we see. So yeah, it is one of the more common reductions we see.
Lots, and like I said, it encompasses quite a lot of things. One of the main ones is updating ledgers and financial records. So quite often you'll see entries in file notes where the client has checked the bank statement, which obviously allowed maybe get 6 to 12 minutes per account per month, depending on how many entries, transactions there are on that. But then they also update the client and income expenditure sheet or other financial records, so that it looks like they're reconciling everything. The SCCO don't like the word reconciling either, even though that's exactly what you're doing. But that, if you can somehow split the time from checking the bank statement and updating it, don't bulk it all together, you might be more likely to get the time that you're claiming, or won't be reduced as much. Because that updating financial records, it was in an unreported case of Philpot, and well, basically it's classed as an overhead. But what you can try and do is, because it is necessary to do that, to do the reconciliations, to check everything balances, especially if you've got a lot of accounts that P has. So if you can try and link that back maybe to, you need to do that work to assist in the preparation of the annual report that you'll do at the end of the year. So then you're, in theory, reducing the time that you're spending at the end of the year doing the actual preparing of that report, because you've already done it earlier on in the year. So as long as your file note sets that out, that it's going to assist. Again, it's the file note. It's exactly that, the detail in the file notes, so that you can say that it was necessary to do this work, because then it reduced the time for preparing the annual report at the end of the year.
Just linking that back to another point we discussed earlier, which was delegation, that the right grade of fee earner undertakes that level of work. So you might stand more of a chance to recover it if the grade C, D is doing it, as opposed to your A or B. And just like Christine said, it's how you're sort of documenting that time and what work has been undertaken, and just use the appropriate fee earner to do it.
Because if you've got a standalone entry of an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours even for reconciling bank statements, and that's what it says on the file note, you're not going to get that back. No. You know, they're just going to strike through and write overhead or Philpot or whatever. So what you need to do as a caseworker or deputy is make sure that you, again, in that file note, explain exactly what you did for that time. Because reconciling on its own, in theory, isn't going to get allowed. You need to go into more detail, explain why.
And if there's 6 bank accounts, there's 6 bank accounts. If you say it's covering 60 transactions, or it spans a 6-month period, so that you're trying to justify that time rather than just using such a short description, which there's more chance of it being reduced, because they will just, like you say, it's easier for them to just put Philpots at the side and disallow it.
I've just remembered one case there when you were saying that as well about file notes, and I had a case where the protected party actually had 145 different shareholdings. And on first glance at the file note, it was, I can't remember the exact wording, but basically it was just reconciling, going through shareholdings. It was something like 3 hours. But when you delved into it deeper and got a bit more information from the deputy, because the papers weren't all on the file, but then when, you know, it's evident that actually there were 145 shareholdings. So you weren't just reconciling or updating any ledgers or anything like that. You had to look in detail at the 145 shareholdings, what the position was, what, you know, what the share price was, what, you know, what they were worth. So again, back to banks. So it's not all overheads, but if you can put as much detail as possible in your file note to justify the time that you claim.
Or even if there was a decision at the end as well of how it's progressed something. So with the shareholdings, they might have then had to come to a decision. Do we sell some? Do we, you know, do we buy more? Do we consolidate some? So you kind of also try and include within your file notes, you know, maybe why you've had to do it and what the outcome of it was, to also try and link back to justifying that level of time.
I mean the thing about that chart, which starts off at overheads, but then you get to a point where it's potentially a financial decision. You go from the work that you should be doing, should be delegated to a D, to then being part of the normal deputyship work. So,
but then back to, like you said, so it might start off at grade D, but it might have to go back to the deputy for the significant decision to be made with regards to what do we do with these shares. So
what about the more sort of textbook admin-y things that is on every file, but are sometimes unavoidable. So our rate letters that we've obviously had around, what, 24? The new ones 24, weren't they? Start of 24, yeah. So
anything sort of like money laundering, corresponding with the SCCO to do with the final cost certificate for like the previous year's bill. That is one that I've never seen.
Or dealing with your cost cost lawyers, arranging payments to cover your costs, fees, interim payments for your own firm. I've seen them get struck out now. They don't tend to be allowed on assessment anymore. That's a firm's overhead is how they would see those costs.
Filing, I'd say quite often, if it's quite obvious on your file note that it is filing papers or printing off file notes for your last year's bill of costs.
The firm's own due diligence checks and conflict checks and things like that. It's necessary for the firm to do, but they see.
I think it goes back to that other point we were chatting about earlier, where it's like some work you're just going to have to do, but it's having that understanding that yes, it needs to be done, but at times times it's not part of the deputyship.
What you could do is, if providing that your time recording system lets you can still capture your time for doing it, but just have it at a 0 value rate if applicable, so that doesn't distort your WIP. But otherwise, if you're claiming it all as chargeable, you could have a couple of £100 by the end of the year, which you're never going to get back, but that distorts your interim billing. And then when you draft the bill, your profit cost might look completely different to what actually the WIP figure is. So it maybe looking at ways as a firm that you can sort of get better at still capturing the time, so you can tell how long it's taking people to do these tasks, but not putting it down as chargeable time,
absolutely.
if possible. Or just being aware as a firm, if there's no way of recording it as non-chargeable, just know that you're not actually going to get that back.
Definitely.
I've seen handover memos as well, if the fee earner's leaving, that has, say, been the main fee earner and it's now going to a new fee earner. And they've spent an hour sort of putting down all the background information to do with the client, or everything to do with the accounts and the statements, utilities, all of this. And if the cost officer sort of gets a whiff of the fact that it is a handover memo, then I've seen them just completely disallow it.
So the SCCO expects fee earners to be interchangeable. So even if a fee earner leaves and another one joins, recovering that time for that file note, that handover note, they don't feel should be allowed. It's an overhead. Why should P pay for what's gone on within the firm? That's not P's fault. So fee earners should be interchangeable. So overhead.